What's going on, YouTube? No Flarkies Emos here with another deck profile. Today we're going over my Worm deck profile. Worms are a pretty cool deck from the Hidden Arsenal set of light reptile monsters. A lot of them have flip effects, and it just makes the core of a pretty interesting stuns type strategy that I have a lot of fun playing. It's very cool. So with that said, let's get into the cards. Starting off with our monsters, I am playing 3 copies of Worm Zex. Worm Zex is our probably strongest normal summon in the deck. It's an 1800 attack reptile monster. It has the effect that when this card is normal summoned, you can send a reptile type worm monster from your deck to the graveyard, which is nice. Get it right in the grave. And of course, if you control a face-up Worm Yagan, this card cannot be destroyed by battle. That second effect is not important, but dumping a worm monster is pretty nice. 1800 attack is pretty nice. And level 4, so definitely a card we want to see. The monster we're normally going to be dumping with Worm Zex is our 3 copies of Worm Yagan. So Worm Yagan is pretty nice here. It's a level 4 monster, which gives it some XZ synergy with Worm Zex. And if the only monster you control is Worm Zex, you can special summon this card from your graveyard in face down defense position. Now I know that doesn't sound that good, but Worm Yagan has this great effect that when this card is flipped face up, you can select a face up monster your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So that's nice. It's pretty compulse. It's like a compulse, and we have a way to trigger that in this deck. So that's pretty nice. And then of course afterward, you can overlay those two into an XZ monster. Now he only got 1000 attack, but he's got 1800 defense. And last thing to note is that if you special summon him from his effect by only controlling Worm's X, he is removed from play. So definitely something to keep in mind, but we definitely want to have plenty of this guy to send to the graveyard. So we're playing 3 of them. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Worm Carteros. Worm Carteros is pretty interesting. It's a reptile flip effect monster that just has the flip effect. You can add a level 4 or lower reptile type worm monster from your deck to your hand. So this can add Worm Zex or Worm Yagan. It can add another Worm Carteros, or it can add our last level 4 target, which is 1 copy of Worm Tentacles. Worm Tentacles is a cool monster to have as a one-off because it makes a nice little deck finisher. It's got 1700 attack, and once per turn, you can remove from play 1 reptile type worm monster from your graveyard, and this card can attack twice during the battle phase this turn. So that's pretty nice. That turns its 1700 attack into 3400 damage if we can get that in on an opponent directly. And so just having him as an option to close out a game a turn early is very nice. Lastly, for our monsters, I'm playing 2 copies of our big boss, Worm King. Worm King, of course, has 2700 attack. It's a much bigger one. This card can be tribute summoned in face-up attack position by tributing 1 face-up reptile worm monster, so you don't have to tribute 2 monsters because everything else you're playing is a worm if this card gets stuck in your hand, although normally we're going to be pulling it out with W Nebula Meteorite. And of course, then it just has this nice effect that you contribute a reptile type worm monster to select 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. That includes itself, so you can exile force it, or you can use your spent Worm Carteros and things like that. Just worm monsters that you've already made use of, and get them off the field to destroy a card. So pretty good card. Definitely, 3 is a bit cloggy, but we like seeing 2, so we can see it and we can summon out multiple. And that is it for the monsters. Next, we're going into our spell cards. I am playing 3 Pot of Extravagance. While we can make some rank 4 XZs, we're mostly going to be winning off of the back of powerful trap cards and stun strategies. So we want to dig more cards out of our deck. We're going to banish 6 extra deck cards randomly face down to draw a card for every 3 that we did. Now we can't do any more drawing, but that's not a big deal. Things like Worm Carteros Search and whatnot. So, we gladly want to take the extra card. In addition, we are playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality. There's a lot of times on our turn where we won't be special summoning and digging the top 3 cards of our deck to get a key piece that's going to win us the game, aka that big floodgate, maybe W Nebula Meteorite, maybe a monster if we haven't got there yet, is just too nice to do. So instead of special summoning, we're going to look at the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 to our hand instead. And last for the spells, I'm playing 1 card of Demise. This is a nice card to have as a one-of because once we've set up and we're just burning through trap cards, it's a nice top deck to reload. We basically draw until we have 3 cards in our hand, and at the end of the turn we have to send them all to the graveyard. But with so many trap spells and trap cards in the deck, we're going to be setting a lot of cards, and if we lose a monster to to the discard. It's not a big deal. Now we can't special summon the turn we use this card, and also our opponent doesn't take any damage after we play it, but all costs that we are glad to pay in order to draw cards, get into what we need to stop our opponent. And that's it for the spells. Next up, we're getting into the trap cards. Starting off, I am playing 3 copies of W Nebula Meteorite. This is a really cool trap card that honestly is one of the reasons to play this deck, because this card is just so cool and a lot of fun. So W Nebula Meteorite is a trap card that says, change all face-down monsters on the field to face-up defense position, which you do have to do, so there has to be face-down monsters, but that's okay. There's monsters we want to play face-down. And so that will also, when you flip monsters face up, that'll trigger like your Worm Yugioh or your Worm Carteros' effect, which is pretty nice. So that means this can end up being a compulse. But of course, during the end phase of this turn, you can change all face-up light reptile-type monsters you control to face-down defense position. So, you know, you can use Worm Yugioh and Worm Carteros, and then you can put them back down, so on your turn you can use them again. But not only that, then you get to draw 1 card for each monster that you did so. So if we're setting 2 monsters, that's drawing 2 cards. And if that wasn't cool enough, there's one more great effect on it, is that we can special summon a level 7 or higher light reptile worm monster from our deck, which is an easy way for us to get out Worm King. So, you know, setting our monsters back down, triggering our flip effects, drawing us cards, and summoning our big boss monster just makes this card so cool. We definitely want to play 3 of it because it's nice to activate multiple times. But more importantly, since it's a normal trap card, that lets us use Trap Trick on it. Trap Trick is a really cool trap card to have in here. It's a trap card that basically just says we banish a normal trap from our deck, except Trap Trick, and then set another copy of the card we banished to our spell and trap card zone. We can activate that card this turn, but we can only activate 1 more trap card after this card resolves. So, given that W Nebula Meteorite is a normal trap card, we can easily banish one to set one and get it going. It just makes it easier to access out of our deck. And we have a couple other targets that we can use Trap Trick with as well. First off, I'm playing 2 copies of Heavy Storm Duster. This is a choice for me and my dueling group just because, you know, I go up against a decent amount of decks with spell and trap cards, other back row and whatnot, and I don't want to deal with them. Heavy Storm Duster is just nice because this trap card targets up to 2 spells and traps and destroys them in exchange for my battle phase, which doesn't even matter if I play it on my opponent's turn. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Waking the Dragon. Very back row heavy deck I'm playing here, and I want to have a card to punish the Harpy's Feather Dusters and Lightning Storms that'll get dropped on me. And this is just a nice card to help facilitate that. Waking the Dragon is if this set card in its owner's control is removed because of an opponent's card and is now banished during the graveyard, we can special summon a monster from our deck or extra deck. And that's pretty cool. We're going to load our extra deck up with targets that can be pulled out with Waking the Dragon. And given that this is a normal trap card, what's nice is that we can use Trap Trick to pull this out, so that if our opponent plays Harpy's Feather Duster and we have Trap Trick face down, we can chain Trap Trick, banish a Waking the Dragon, set the Waking the Dragon. Waking the Dragon will then be set. Then Harpy's Feather Duster will resolve, sending our Waking the Dragon out of there and allowing Waking the Dragon to trigger its effect. So it's just a very cool card to work with Trap Trick. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Blazing Mirror Force. Sometimes I feel like I need a little battle protection, given that not every monster we have is pretty strong. And, you know, we have floodgates that are going to disrupt our opponent's combos, but, you know, if we can go even further by destroying their monsters, leaving them wide open, it's pretty nice. Blazing Mirror Force, of course, is Mirror Force. When your opponent's monster declares an attack, we're going to destroy all their attack position monsters. Except what's nice about Blazing Mirror Force is that we both players take burn damage equal to half the attack of the destroyed monsters, which is pretty sweet. And that burn damage is very important in a deck like this, where we need to stack up as much damage as possible because we have to try to close out the game quickly before our opponent draws the outs. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Lost Wind, another trap card we can pull out with Trap Trick. Lost Wind is pretty nice because we can target a face-up special summon monster on the field, negate its effect, and half its attack. That's pretty nice because the highest attack monster we do have in here is 2700. So if our opponent can somehow special summon a monster that's bigger than that, having the ability to have that attack is very nice. Even though Worm King could theoretically exile Force, itself anyway, it's good to have the option, and just negating effects of a special summon monster is good. And what's nice about this card too is it's got some recycling. If this card's in our graveyard and our opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, we can set this card but banish it when it leaves the field. So pretty cool trap card. Next up are continuous floodgates here that are basically our main win con. I've got 3 copies of Goes in Match. Goes in Match is pretty sweet. Each player can only control 1 attribute of monster and must send all others to the graveyard. So all of our worm monsters are light monsters, which means we're not going to be punished by that at all. But a lot of combo strategies that revolve making a lot of different extra deck monsters will just lose to this card. You can also play Rivalry because it does types instead of attributes, but I find Goes in Match to be a little more universal, little better. In addition to Goes in Match, I'm also playing 3 copies of Summon Limit, our other big win con. Summon Limit just says neither player can summon more than twice per turn. We're certainly not going to be doing that, and to stop combo decks, we need to make sure they can't summon more than twice per turn. So Summon Limit, these are definitely, this or Goes in Match are definitely the card you want to dig for with Duality and Extravagance. It does a lot. This makes W Nebula a lot stronger because Worm Yugioh sending a monster back, leaving your opponent with 1 monster is pretty nice because you can normally deal with that. And just a pretty good option to have. We definitely want to see it. And last, I'm playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment is just a great counter trap that we pay half our life points to negate a summon or a spell and trap card activation. This is mainly here to protect our game-winning floodgates like Summon Limit or Goes in Match. And, we want to have the option to protect those so they can't be outed and our opponent can't play to the fullest of their deck's power so that we can win. Just a very flexible card all around, and it's very nice. Just be careful if you burn yourself right out the gate and want to play Blazing Mirror Force. Again, with the trap cards, you can always switch it out to deal with your matchup. And that is the main deck. Going into our extra deck real quick, I am playing 3 copies of Last Warrior from Another Planet. This extra deck is all targets that can be summoned off of Waking the Dragon. Last Warrior from Another Planet is a really nice card because it just says when this card's on the field, neither player can summon monsters. So if their opponent's board is open when they hit us with the Lightning Storm or the Harpy's Feather Duster, we can summon Last Warrior, and then all they could do is set monsters and we can whittle away. So just a nice option to have. Next up, we are playing 3 copies of Naturia Exterio. Exterio is a good monster to pull out in certain matchups that are very spell and trap dependent because this card can negate spells and traps on either player's turn and not even once per turn. All you have to do is have a card in the graveyard to banish and then send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. So as long as you have that set up, you can keep banishing spells and traps infinitely. So if a matchup is very dependent on their spells and traps resolving, they are not going to like to see that card. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon is a nice boss monster to have. It's a 3,500 attack monster that's unaffected by other card effects. That makes it really hard to deal with. You're either going to have to kaiju over it or find a way to beat it by battle. And there are just certain decks and matchups that are not going to be able to deal with that monster, and that makes Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon a good target to go into. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. This monster has 4,500 attack. Now it can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects, which is not as good as being unaffected, but still pretty good. And 4,500 attack, an extra 1,000 attack is pretty nice to have. Additionally, this card has an effect that we can destroy a card on the field instead of attacking with it this turn, and that can come in handy. Just a good option to fill out the extra deck. And lastly, I am playing 3 copies of Geomathmech Final Sigma. When we special summon this card in the extra monster zone, it's unaffected by card effects except Mathmech cards, which basically makes it a, Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon, but it's got 500 less attack, which isn't so bad, but it does gain the effect that when you do battle damage to your opponent by battle with a monster with this card, that battle damage is doubled. So that's really nice if they have a weak attack monster on the field and you just want to, rip through it and do a lot of damage. So a good option to have to round out our Waking the Dragon extra deck. So that is it for my Worm deck profile. So very cool. I love using the flip effect monsters. W Nebula Meteorite is just a really fun card. I love how cool these cards look. The fact that the monsters are all hollow is a nice touch. I always like that. and just makes a fun little different engine to play a stun style strategy. And I'm very happy with it. Very much love this deck. It's very fun to play. Let me know what you think. I'd love to know what you're doing with Worms. Thanks for checking out the deck profile, and I'll catch you in the next one.